Hi there. Hi, everybody. My name's Brenda Hipsher, and I'm joined today by my very good friend, Alan Shapiro. Now, Alan and I have known each other 10 years, so I could say that Alan is an old friend, but I will say that he is a longtime friend. I want to thank you all for coming. Alan, I want to especially thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
You know me. I've been a fan for so long.
I know.
This feels like a privilege.
Well, it's our privilege. So what's going to happen is Alan is going to give us a great presentation today on streamlining your workflow. Now, this is super important because not only does it mean that it makes your edit more enjoyable, it means that you're outside shooting more. So editing is great and wonderful and all that, but do we really want to be sitting inside, Alan?
Yes, we do.
We do?
We do. So equal parts, equal time.
All right.
Right?
Okay.
Upper body workout, lower body workout.
All right.
Cardio, weight training.
All right, but we do want to be outside, right?
Or not in this heat.
Okay, you're right. We're going to be shooting macro, right? Or in our kitchen or wherever, all the wonderful things that you do.
We want to be smiling. We don't want to be aggravated. We want to be being creative, not being frustrated. That's the theme for today.
Absolutely. All right. So I've talked enough. I don't want to take any more of Alan's time. So Alan, are you ready?
I am so ready.
All right. So here we go. Take it away, Alan. It's all yours.
So can you see my Lightroom screen?
Yes, we can. And it's beautiful.
Excellent. Okay. So we're going to start. Actually, you know what? I don't want to start here. Well, you can see me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I love color. I love working with color. I love pushing it and seeing how it can affect not just my mood, but everyone's mood who I share my work with. Now, what's really important is that where I start is the most accurate place possible. And I'll liken it to this. We've all likely walked into a giant store to buy a new TV, and there's a wall of TVs, and everyone is showing color differently. Which one's the right one? Where do I start? How do I, and likely you pick one and you bring it home, and my guess is when you set it up, it looks different than you remember it in the store. So the other thing is our eyes, or actually our brains, will compensate for color shifts. So depending on the time of the day you're shooting or you're editing, depending on whether it's bright sunshine, warm light, or kind of cloudy, cooler light, your eyes will compensate for that and everything will look normal. Now, that's fine out in the real world, but when we're creating work that we want to share, that we want to be proud of, that we may want to print, here's another thing. How many times have you edited something, been so happy with it, sent it off to a lab, and it came back and you looked at it and it didn't really match what's on your screen? So that's where color control, color management matters huge. We want to, at the time of capture, we want to start with something that gives us a reference point. And I'm going to talk about that. And then we want to make sure that our monitor or monitors, there are times I am working at home on my big monitors, but there are other times where I'm traveling and I have my laptop. And so I will share images between because I like to keep busy and I love to process. I want to make sure that I'm not looking at what I sent myself, later on my laptop and it looks different than what I remember it. God, did I send myself the edited version? Because now it's on. So I want to optimize between my monitors that I'm working with. Ultimately, every time I shoot with a camera or cameras and lenses, that requires a unique profile. Now, I don't want that to sound like a lot of work because it's really, really easy. Here's where we start. We start with this. We start, if you want bigger, we start with something like this. If we're shooting macro or micro, we shoot with these. These are color checker reference targets. This is called the Passport because it also has gray cards. And what this does is it provides a scientific reference for everything you're going to capture. So whether I'm shooting people, click, whether I'm shooting still lives on the floor, behind me, wherever in studio, I am working with one of these targets and I'm capturing an image with every unique lighting setup that I'm working with, or natural light. If it goes from bright sun to really cloudy, I'll take another shot, and this gives me a reference, okay? So that's what targets allow me to do at capture. Now, how do we make that work? I'm gonna come back in and I'm gonna show you. Here's a shot I just did the other day, and this is a raw file. By the way, if you're not shooting raw, please shoot raw. Please, please, please shoot raw, non-negotiable. So here's the target that I took in the shot, and you'll see that now I am going to come up here and go to File, Export with Preset, Color Checker Camera Calibration Software. So any one of these targets will come with the ability to download this software, which will make a custom profile. I'm going to work in Lightroom today. The same system will work in Adobe Camera Raw. So for you Photoshop users, there's that. And so I will create a custom calibration by clicking on it. It's going to ask me to name it. In the interest of time, I've named this. It says it already exists. So I'm going to cancel out of it. But then it is going to cycle through, create a unique profile based on the camera, the lens, and the target, that combination, and say, here is the ideal profile. So now it will ask you to restart. So I won't do that. Here's where we start. We start with a profile, and Adobe always defaults to their profile, and they give you a bunch. I've got some favorites here. There are tons in the newest edition of Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. So now we see that there's a whole bunch of profiles in here. Now, Adobe thinks they can read our minds, and they try really hard. And don't get me wrong, I love my friends at Adobe, but these are kind of what they think is an acceptable profile. So color or landscape, where they optimize for greens and blues. There's neutral, there's standard and vivid. And now, so that's all well and good. That's Adobe. My camera, I shoot with a Fuji GFX. I'm shooting on the 100S. So now there's camera matching profiles. And all of these will provide a different look as I scroll over. But these are all subjective. And I don't want to start in a subjective place. So we're going to close these out. And I'm going to go to my custom profiles. Now, let's see. I made one called bread. So here is the bread profile. Now, we can look at different ones. And, if I switch back and forth, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see. Look at the blues in the target. So here's, whoops. Sorry. Let's go back. And let's go to bread. So, and before and after. So do you see what's happening? Do you see that the blues are getting more vibrant, more accurate? Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to set a white balance. So we've created a color profile, but now the next important thing, I'm going to close my profiles, is to white balance. Now, let's look at something interesting. Here is the as shot color temperature. So the camera took an average of the room I'm in, and at the time I was shooting said, you're at, 4,950 degrees Kelvin. Now, that's fine, but that's not accurate. How we get to accurate is we come over here and we click on this 18% gray, middle gray, and watch what happens. Boom, my color temperature went all the way up to 8,500. Before, after, huge jump. Now, depending on who you are, you might, our eyes adjust to color shifts. So you might look at this and say, yeah, maybe a little blue, but you know what? Over time, it becomes pleasing. let's go back here. This becomes a starting point. This is where I want to get to. And if I were working really fast and not talking to you all, I would be able to do this in about 30 seconds. So boom, from wherever I'm shooting, no matter what the lighting conditions, I can now take the camera, the lens, and this target and get to a completely neutral place that has no subjectivity. That is life-changing. I don't know about you, but my time's valuable, whether it's my free time or my professional time. If I'm working for a client and I'm processing lots of things, I want to be very efficient. If I'm working for myself, I want to be creative. So I don't want to waste time getting to this place. By the way, it also helps with shadow detail and whatever. So now I promised you we'd get to some, more creative processing. So let's do that. So I'm going to start here. Another thing that I want to tell you before we even get started is there is a level of subjectivity that comes in, or I'll call it background bias. So whether you're editing in Photoshop or Lightroom, I want you to know that you can come in, you can go to your preferences, and depending on the image you're working with, you can change the fill from white. Now, like if I'm working in an on-white image like I like to do, because that's where I practice composition, I may put it to on-white because that helps me get to the brightest white possible. Or I may go to black. But depending on the image, notice how as you're looking at the main image and I change the background color, some things are getting easier or harder to distinguish depending on the tonality of your image. So I want you to remember that as you're editing, you can change your default preference. Okay, so that's number one. So now let's go here. Now we're ready to make a creative. Let me fit this in screen and minimize all of this. So now let's make a creative edit. So now I'm going to take this and I want to start with this image. So this is what I ultimately wanted to do. So I'm going to come here. I've got my target. I'm going to come back to the image. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to sync the two of them. Now, because the only thing I've changed is the profile and the temperature, and meaning the white balance, this is my standard. When I'm syncing images, I'm not syncing any spot removal or any cropping, but across a shoot, I am likely always going to start by syncing a bunch of images. Now, if you're doing weddings or events or portraits and you have a whole body of imagery and you haven't changed your lights, this way you can instantly profile and white balance a batch of images. Think about the amount of time you'd be saving with that. So here I am. I've come to my image. Where is it? It's right here. And now let's make some creative things. So I'm going to start in the basic channel. And I am always doing this and that with my highlights, taking them all the way down and opening up my shadows. You're saying, why do you do that? Because I want to control my contrast with my whites and blacks as opposed to my contrast slider. Contrast and exposure affect everything. I want to control specific zones within my image. So now I can come back and instead of making a blanket, I'm going to reset these. Instead of doing a blanket contrast push, where now my blacks and my midtones and my highlights and my whites are all getting uniformly pushed to one extreme or the other, so it's not as subtle as I want, I'd rather work with each zone individually. Okay, so we're going to start there. And I'm going to take my blacks down a little bit. Now, I don't need to add any texture, any clarity. I may want to, actually, this is not the image I wanted to work on. Where's the image I wanted to work on? Did it disappear? It's this image. Okay, but I don't have it, so I'm going to, doesn't matter. Here we go. Here's the image. So now let me, again, go back. Where is it? Mix. Here it is. That one. Okay. Boom. 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 Sync. Good. I'm back. There we go. Let's make this as big as possible. Let's do the same thing. So I've reduced my highlights. I'm opening up my shadows. I'm going to take my whites up a little bit. Now here, what I can do is I'm holding down the shift key. This is a super user trick. And I'm double clicking on my whites and double clicking on my blacks. This is now doing an optimization. So I'm maxing out without clipping. Actually, I've got a teeny bit of clipping in my blacks, but that's okay. Now I can go down and I can say, everything is fine. I don't need to add any vibrance or saturation on a global level. But what I do want to do is I want to come down and I want to start making some tweaks. So you see, I'm sort of setting up this farmer's breakfast in France. I'm going to Paris in a few weeks. And, I had a friend there who said, I go out in the field and I pick a few beans and then some buttered bread and all is right in the world. And I said, that's wonderful. So I'm trying to recreate that vibe. I'm looking at this and the blue and the purple are not coming out enough. So instead of just pushing vibrance, which is going to shift everything, I'm going to come in and I'm going to make my blues a little bit more turquoise. Again, I'm looking for separation between the napkin and the beans. I may come down here and I may push my purple up a little bit, my magenta up, because I'm going to pull out the beans. And where I really think I can have some fun is with the luminance. Now I can play with lightness and darkness. So I can take my blue and I can brighten it or darken it. Are you able to see what's happening? I just want to make sure that these changes, they're obvious to me. I want to make sure they're not so subtle to you folks watching.
They're pretty subtle, Alan, but we can see them.
Okay, so I'm going to push it a little further than I normally would. And in a case like this, I'm going to take my purple down a little bit because I want it to be darker, but I want to take my magenta up. So I'm playing with specific colors on a very local level here in order to work with the colors in the image to lead your eye and make it just a little bit more pleasing. So next thing I'll do, I'm not going to add a curve yet, but now I want to go down and I think actually I do want to play with some tone curves because that's a fun thing. So let's look here. What I'm going to do, I'm in the luminosity curve as opposed to a specific color channel. We can work with any or all of these. And I'm simply going to click on these 4 quadrants, which are defining my blacks at the bottom, my whites at the top. I've got highlights, midtones, and shadows. And I want to crush the blacks a little bit. I want to minimize black in my image and make it a little bit more gray. So I can take it all the way. So you can see it becomes a little bit painterly, a little bit like velvet. I love this look, particularly for some of my editorial work. Now, I may want to take my shadows down a little bit. I'm going to leave the midpoint, and now I want to brighten my highlights up. So when I do that, boom, here's a before, here's an after. Now, I don't know what you can see, but I'm seeing that my blacks, I'm losing a little bit too much detail, so I'm going to pull this down. But here is a curve in the luminosity channel that is now giving me a different kind of mood, a more unique look. And that's what we want when we're post-processing. Unless you're a photojournalist or working for National Geographic, this is about finding an image that speaks to you, that you want to share, and then interpreting it so that it is uniquely yours, so that hopefully either people recognize your work, if that's what you want, or that the mood you're feeling comes through in the art you're creating. That's what this is all about. So I want you looking at the difference that makes. Now, it's just a tabletop shot, but now I can add a mood. So now I think the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to effects, and I want to talk about vignettes because that's important. Now, here's another secret thing. There's a couple of different styles you can choose, and I'll bet most of you don't know what the difference is. Highlight priority maintains a higher level of saturation when you create a vignette. Color priority is a more natural. It doesn't add a little bit more to the darkness. So when you're doing highlight priority, my words, this may not be what is actually happening from a science standpoint, but highlight priority adds more color. Color priority maintains the image in a subtler, more average colorway. And paint overlay just works in black or white. So if I click paint overlay and I zoom in, all I'm doing is literally adding black.
Ooh.
We don't like that. Depending on the image, now here's the difference. look at what happens when I go with color priority, and I'm going to quickly switch between highlight priority. You may not see it, but let's see if there's a bigger difference.
Yeah, we have a request to just show the befores and afters maybe a couple of times, if you could.
Okay, so here is nothing. Well, I didn't do anything yet. So here's boom, boom, boom. I'm going to come down here. I'm also going to work with my midpoint, and I'm going to bring it out a little bit, meaning I can come, let me do this for you all. So here is a dramatic vignette with no feather. We don't want that ever. So the amount of feathering makes it, a little bit more natural, a little bit subtler. We can change the roundness or make it more sort of old school, like I'm working with a film, a film negative and projecting it, right? So these are all, and in a lot of cases, I will err on the side of rounder rather than more rectangular. So now we'll come back and we'll optimize this. So we're going to come down to about here. And from a highlight standpoint, this allows you to maintain highlights. So I'm holding down the Option key, which gives you a maximum vignette, because now you can see when I use the highlight slider, look at the edges of the bread, look at the crusts. Can you see that I'm able to, even though I've added a vignette, I'm able to maintain the highlights. So that, again, a more pleasing look. And then the last thing I'm going to do, so here's before, after. The last thing I'm going to do is what I consider a secret recipe. I'm going to come down to calibration, which was a tool designed to compensate for sensor shifts, color shifts in sensors. So you could compensate unless you're doing a custom profile, which we're all going to start doing, right? So we don't need that. And my go-to thing is to take the blue saturation and push it a little. So I'm going to push it kind of, can you see if I go down, if I go up? So I find that adding, maybe 12 to 15%, I do it on literally every image. So it just pushes a little bit more warmth through. I'm not sure, again, scientifically how that works, but here's that image. So starting with let's reset it. Here's the original image. And there's the final image. Now, I might spend a little bit more time and come in with brushes, but we'll do that a little bit later. I want to be respectful of time. I want to show you a couple of other examples. So here's an image I did for a newspaper, and it was a story on like cobblers. And so here is the color checker. This is the raw image. This is the profiled image. You'll see now if I go down to basic. So pears and berries, don't look at who it's for. And here is the white balanced version. So again, all I have to do, go into the original, come down to my custom profiles. I think I have one called pears and berries. I do. Boom. Done. Close that. Click on my eyedropper. Click on my middle gray, my 18% gray, and I've gotten to the image. Now I just go and I zoom over to the image without the color checker, and I sync it. So here's Creative Edit version 1. Now I like to talk about creative sketching. If you know me, you know that invariably I will start with an image and create 4 virtual copies. You do that with Command, comma. And then I will just play a little bit because I'm never sure when I'm beginning where I want to take an image. Sometimes my clients will drive me toward a specific look that I've done for them in the past, or will develop a look for a series. But when I'm starting out, it's the time to play and experiment and see what's possible. And so all of these were parts of sketches. And then I love working in black and white. So when I'm done with my color work, I will immediately go into a black and white profile, and I will play in black and white. So another version, creepy, ew, I'm going to skip by this, but here is the profiled version. Here is the white balanced version. And here is the final version. Okay, before, final. So this This makes me so happy. Here's a challenging one. So these are called pine berries. They're a hybrid strawberry that actually tastes like pineapple. I highly recommend you find them, especially if you're processing. They're one, could be my most favorite fruit these days. So this is for an editorial article on pine berries, and we thought we'd have some fun and make the color of the strawberries drain out. So you see that concept. But now this is a challenging thing to, capture. Let's look at, as it was shot, the color temperature at the time was 5,300. Studio lighting getting as close to 5,600 neutral as possible. But now my profile took me to 5,050. My white balance took me to 7,000. So now I'm at my perfect neutral place. But now I've got I know what I need to do, which is make it a little bit brighter, a little bit crisper. So this is the final image. I actually took my optimal temperature down a little bit, but I started in a place that if I were working without a color checker, I would be guessing and I would be struggling and I wouldn't have that neutral thing. Now, this applies not just to still life. This works with portraits as well. And it's really important in the garden. So here's a friend, Loretta, and here is the profiled version. Did I get there? I did. And here's the white balanced version. And you'll see I'm under very controlled studio lighting situations. So I'm not sure if it's coming through. Here's before. Also, look at the shadow detail that comes out after. Before, after. Now I'm going to go over to the final image. Here she is. And I'm going to apply the profile. I got it. She's from Toronto. So now what I want to do, let's see. Do I have the profile? I don't have the white balance though. So I'm going to sync these. Much better. So let's do a reset. Here's before, here's after. So I have optimized skin tones. I have beautiful shadow detail based on how I shot it. Now I can go in and creatively, from an edit standpoint, I can open up the shadows a little bit more. And now here's a hypothetical. So this is looking really, really good to me. But now let's say Loretta wanted to, use this for something. And she said, I thought that lipstick color was great when we were shooting, but I don't know now. Can we play with it? And of course we can. That's where we're not going to change anything in our global adjustments. We're not doing anything with vibrance or saturation. I'm going to come in and I'm going to make some very precise changes. So first of all, let's click on the selection tool, because you may think this is pink, but my guess is there's more magenta in it than anything. So yes, I am right. So by clicking that, I am identifying not what I think the color is, because I can go up and play with reds, but I don't want to do that. I want to know that, it's magenta. And so I can make it more red or more purple and blue just by playing with the hue. And that way I can make a much more localized correction. And then again, I want to show you the power of playing with the blue saturation slider in calibration. Can you see what happens? It adds it's like sprinkling salt on something. It just makes it taste better. So there's that. We'll do something else. So here's some scapes that I did the other day. Here is the raw image. Here is the profiled image, not a big change. But now let's go to the white balanced image. So let's do again, because I want you to see the color of the green is really important in an image like this, because it's for an article on scapes and cooking with scapes. So we better make sure they're represented properly. I will always create custom profiles for exactly this reason. But the next most important thing is, look, I may want to normally, if I didn't have the color checker, I would be clicking in here and thinking, okay, where's my neutral gray, right? Pick a target neutral, says Lightroom or says Adobe Camera Raw. And if I were to click on it, let's see, my color temperature went to 5700. And I might normally think that's okay, but I need to be really accurate. So I'm going to click here. And in reality, the neutral gray is 6000 from a color temperature. So I would have guessed wrong. And I can't afford to do that, especially if I have people that are asking me to do something. So now here we went from this, just to show you what a final image would be. We went way more dramatic. And looking at this now, this is the final image. So it got very dark and moody. I might normally, ooh, what happened there? That's not right. Yeah, I pushed my whites way too far and there's a delay. So, but I might open up my darks a little bit. Here's another thing. I don't know about the rest of you, but every time I look at an image, even if I processed it yesterday, I want to do it again. I want to do it over. That's perfection paralysis. It's a good thing because it leads to lots of practice. It's not necessarily a good thing if you want to put out a body of work and not worry about it, because I'm always looking at things and then wanting to do them over. Okay, last image that we're going to have some fun with in the interest of time. Here, I went to the Union Square Farmers Market just the other day, and I came back with a whole bunch of things. By the way, support your farmers markets because those are the local people close to you, and that's important. And here's the raw image with my target in it. I created a custom profile called Home Gardening. I don't know if you can see the difference. Let's look at the blues here. Just focus on these two squares right here, the dark blue and the periwinkle blue. Boom, custom profile. Also, you see it in the purple. Are you seeing that shift? So now this is the optimized place. That's really good. Now I want to get to a white balance place. Boom, here we go. Look what happened. We went from 4850 to 6050, more in the totally neutral place. This is my starting point. Now I'm going to click on this and let's see, is this? So here is a final image, but I want to show you what I did. So I'm going to come back here, and in an image like this, first thing I want to do is go back and make sure I am synced up. So now what I'm doing is I'm bringing over my color profile and my white balance. Here we go. Is this it? So now what I want to do is I want to start optimizing this. So where would I start? For me, it's a go-to. Forgive me. This is my secret recipe. So now I'm sharing all sorts of things, and I want to take my whites up a little bit. Okay. So if I do that, and let's see, in my blacks, I think I want to open my blacks up a little bit to there. Again, I'm not doing anything with texture. Now I want to go, and here again, you saw those beans from the bread shoot. I saved them, or actually the bread shoot came after this. Now I want to go and I want to play with the color. These are dill flowers, and I don't remember them being as green. So I want to come in and I want to play with those. So again, I'm not doing anything with vibrance or saturation yet. Right now, I'm going to look, and I'm just going to go down to my luminance, and I'm going to start with my greens, and I'm going to take them up a little bit. So I'm going to brighten them because they were a little bit brighter. I'm going to take my purples up a little bit. So I pull the color out of those purple beans, and I'm going to take my magenta up a little bit. Here's a before and an after, probably really subtle, but really important. Now I want to look at sharpening. I'm going to come down here to my detail panel, and I'll teach you a trick here. So now here's what you need to know about sharpening. There's an amount. This is how much sharpening. The radius is this is measured in pixels. So what's going to happen is we're going to look for edges because that's where contrast and sharpening happens. The amount of detail is how much it's going to add, and then the masking is where it's applied. So here's a trick. We're going to hold down the Option key, And now it's going to convert it to black and white as we're holding it down. So we can, and we've got a loop here, so we can look at where we're not introducing too much noise. And in most cases, I find that I leave the default amount where it is. Radius is edges. So again, I'm looking, if I go too far, I'm going to start seeing haloing. As you can see, if you look over here at the radius window. So I'm going to pull it down to probably just under its default. For detail, here again, it can very quickly get noisy if you go all the way up. So I find myself working with less detail. And here's where the magic happens. So once you've figured out an amount, even if you're working with the default, you have to decide where you want that sharpening. So just like in all Adobe programs, white reveals, black conceals. So wherever you see white, that is where the sharpening is being applied. Where you see black, no added sharpening. Now, why do I need to add sharpening? Because I may be sharing this digitally and there's always a little bit of a loss. Or I may be printing it on a textured paper. By the way, I love to print, and we'll talk about that in a second. So there's that. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back down and I'm going to play with a little bit of vignetting. Now, I can work this way, and obviously I can also come into my brush tool. And if an oval gradient isn't giving me the precise level of softening, I can come in and I can create not a uniform gradient, which is what the vignetting tool does, but I can create a series of very subtle gradients using specific things. So again, I may just want to take the shadows down a little bit, and I may want to reduce the exposure a little bit, but you'll notice I did it on an angle. You see here, it's not straight, it's angled. Now I can change that by clicking on this, but now I can be very precise because I've got some space here that I don't want you lingering on. So I'm going to do something like that, and then I'm going to create another mask, and I'm going to do it up here. And so here's where I can be much more specific and intentional with my decisions. So I'm going to click out of that, and let's just jump around because I want to show you, okay, so here's another image, and let's see what's here. Here is yet another one. So I think what I want to do is, so notice I haven't applied any sort of more painterly things. This is where I want to come back, and I want to emphasize the power of curves because they really are magic. So I'm going to do, again, I'm going to start with luminosity. I'm going to drop a couple of points. I'm going to crush my blacks a little bit. I'm going to subtly take my shadows down. Now I'm going to come up and I'm going to open up my midtones just a teeny bit. And I'm going to open up my highlights. Again, just a little bit. So here's a before, here's an after. Now I may decide to come back. This is where the balancing happens, and come back to my basic panel. And now, because I've crushed the blacks, I want to open them up a little bit. So I'm making all sorts of decisions. And once I've got a rhythm that I go through my panels with, but now as it gets more and more creative and more expressive and emotional, now I want you remembering to go back in and looking at certain things and seeing where your eye is drawn and where you need a little bit more attention. And so come back and let's maybe add a little bit of a brush. And I'm going to make sort of a big brush because I just want a hint of light over here. So I'm going to set a flow of about 30. And you see I'm just sizing roughly. And what I'm going to do now is I've just dropped something, but you can't see it. So I'm going to come up because I want to make a different point. So, boom. I have show overlay on. So sometimes if we're masking something very specific, we've got a couple of tools that help us. We can click on auto mask, and that will, constrain your brush, the tool you're working with, to certain areas. But the other thing is, I want you to remember that this overlay tool, which sort of shows you where you've been, you can change the color. So if you're finding that it's a little bit too dark, you can click somewhere else, and this will become your new brush color. So remember that that's available. You're not stuck with the default magenta. You can change that. It will make your life easier. So now I know where my brush is, and all I want to do is I'm going to come down, and I think I'm going to open up some highlights, and maybe push my shadows a little bit. The last thing I always play with is my exposure, because again, that is a bigger change, and I don't want to get into too specific, too harsh a change. I'm talking in subtleties, but if I wanted to, obviously I could take it all the way up. So this is allowing me now, if I take my flow down, now I can just be very subtle. So working with different size brushes, I can introduce just a little bit of brightening, very subtle, and I'll click this on and off where I think we need it. This is the Lightroom version of dodging and burning. Okay, so let's before, after. And obviously I'm being clumsy. You can see that I don't want my brush affecting the background here. So I can come in and I can subtract it. I can hold it down my Option key, and I can subtract from that. But that's how I do what I do. So with 15 minutes left, I'm gonna stop sharing.
No, don't stop sharing yet.
Okay, I'm not gonna stop sharing.
We got. What a great audience we have today. They are just amazing. I've been typing my little fingers off.
Okay.
So let's go back to some of the questions that we have first in the chat, and then we'll go to the other one. So we have a couple of questions, Alan, about two things. So let's start with one. The color checker itself, sort of the anatomy of it.
Yeah.
And then how to create the profile again.
Okay.
Just to go backward a little bit.
For me, it's 4 steps. We always start with the original image that you took wherever you were taking it. If I'm doing a landscape, which scared the piss out of me, I am working with my classic target, and I will have someone hold it up, or I'll prop it up somewhere, and I will take my reference shot. Then I will pull it out of the frame, and I know that until the clouds change, or if I'm in one place and hours have gone by where the lighting has changed, I don't need another reference shot. So I take that reference shot. Here is a reference shot. Let me get to a better reference shot. Boom, boom. Okay. Now I go in, File, Export with Preset, Color Checker Camera Calibration. I'm going to click on that. It's going to tell me to name it. I'm going to name it Scapes number 2. And I'm going to hit save. And you'll see over here, Lightroom is processing the profile. It's reading the target. It's reading every one of these scientifically determined colors that match with the CIE standard. This is the reference. Anything else is guessing. And it's looking at all of these targets created in 1976 and first published in the Journal of Photographic Engineering, I learned 10 years ago. It's going to tell me my profile is completed and I have to restart, but remember I did it. So now I don't have to do, if I restarted, I come back to my profile. I'm going to browse my profiles and I'm going to come back to what was called scapes. Now I did a couple of different scapes. So I did one on a baking pan and another on my concrete plates. So I'm going to click on that. And that's all I have to do. And then I close my profile. Now I'm going to take my white balance tool, and instead of as shot, temperature of 5650, I'm going to come and I'm going to click on middle gray, 18% gray. Don't get confused with the percentage. It's middle gray. Click on it, and boom, my color temperature changed. And now I am in an optimized place. Period, hard stop, end of story. You are done. Any image you took in the series or sequence, now you can just click and select and sync, and you're good.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing.
Isn't it?
I know. Now, Alan, Mr. John Fodor has given us a wonderful question. He says, confused. Why focus on the color checker and not on calibrating your monitor first? Can't imagine that the color checker will yield the same results on two different monitors, or am I wrong with that assumption?
Always. See, I always forget to say something in my preamble. Going back to the TVs in Best Buy or Walmart or Costco or wherever you buy your TVs, and you're looking at a wall of them, every monitor, every brand monitor, every monitor, if I took 3 iMac Pros, literally from the same batch, and put them side by side, there would be minutely subtle differences in color. But monitors age. If your monitor is a year old, 6 months old, it will change. The luminance will change. The things that make the monitor show you color need to be tuned up a little bit. And that's where a colorimeter, I use this to profile my monitors every 2 weeks, like clockwork, because I am processing literally every single day. At least an hour a day I am processing, so I need a profiled monitor. And every monitor I use. So my desktop, my laptop, if I am teaching on the road and if I need to bring a projector or if someone has a projector, I profile that too, because I want everything to be optimized to the scientific standard, not to what I think, not to what I'm guessing, but to what it needs to be.
Great. Now, Alan, we've got some confusion about that patch that you're using for the white balance. Some people are thinking that that's an 18% gray patch, and that is a white balance patch. In fact, it's the same color that we use for the white balance card that's also in the Color Checker Passport. So, yeah, that white balance.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is not a gray, right?
Yeah.
I don't think, I don't have a gray balance card with me, but so that's me misspeaking. This is the white balancing tool. Now, if we were doing portraits, here's something interesting.
Do you have a Calibrite Color Checker Passport there?
I do.
Right beside you? Open up the other side.
I need to be careful. You never want to touch the paint chips.
That's right.
We want to keep our oily fingers off. White balance, gray balance.
And 18% gray. Okay, so you see the difference, guys. Yeah.
Okay. So that was me misspeaking. So here, going back to Loretta, the second square away from what you think is white is the white balance one. Now, there are some extra tools up here. You'll see very small that there is a person and there is a mountain. And there's a little notch in this first chip, which precisely matches the white balance. And then these will allow me to warm up. So let's start here. So let's jump in a little bit close and let's undo that. So again, I'm clicking on my white balance tool and I'm going from as shot 5650 and I'm going to click here. And now I'm going to go back again. Look at Loretta's beautiful skin. Did you see it get a little bit warmer?
It's very hard to see. So yeah, go to the more. Yeah, there you go. Now we can see it really warm up.
Before,
after.
So now if I had a landscape, so the middle patch here is neutral gray for white balancing. Now it allows me to go cooler or warmer, because you know those landscape photographers, they want a little bit more room to roam. I don't know that you would ever make skin cooler, and if you do, you can use your color temperature over here. But in terms of getting to a consistent place, you've got some options here in the color checker.
Well, you know, if you're doing zombies, you might want to make it cooler. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yep, I hear you. So speaking of, let's go back to baby faces, right? Because not for any reason. Go ahead, more questions.
Okay.
Should I stop
All right.
sharing, or do you want me to just stay where I am?
Let's see. I had a couple of questions here. In the HSL panel, are you working in that at all? Just you personally?
Always.
Okay.
So
All right.
Rarely will I work in vibrance or saturation. Rarely. Here's an example where I was playing, because this gives me a sense what's possible. And if I click off of it, and now I want to, for instance, make my oranges more like I want the cinnamon to be a certain cinnamon bark color. Let's see what I did. So I took my yellows up because my pears weren't yellow enough, and that's in saturation. I took my oranges down because they were a little too bright from a luminance standpoint. And I upped my blues because, as I want to say, blueberries make everything better, and I wanted them to pop a little bit. So I'm, pushing the blues a little bit, which just gives them a little hint of whatever. And I may take my purples, because there's always purple in blueberries. And again, that's where if you have any questions and you want to make very localized color adjustments, start with the targeted adjustment tool and click on something and just randomly move it. And you'll see that this pear is mainly yellow, but it's got a little bit of orange. I would have thought there might be some green in it. And I might have mistakenly, if I didn't know this, I would start playing around with all the sliders, and now I'm getting further away from accuracy. So now that's what I would do with HSL. What else we got?
Okay. So this is a very interesting question. Cynthia says, does he label files to keep them straight, like color picker, profile, white balance? How does he tell what is what 6 months later? And that's an easy one, because all you have to do is click on the image and it's going to tell you exactly what white balance and exactly what profile you used, right?
Right. So here I am. Let me go to my basic panel. I know, and if I went into an actual catalog of images, this shoot had probably 10 different setups of the scapes, because I wanted to have some choices. And now I see that I created the Scapes Concrete one. So I know this is the profile, and I go from there. I would not normally have each of these. I divided these. Here is the unprofiled image. Here is the profiled image. Here's the white balance image, just for teaching purposes. Normally I would go from this image. I would, create the profile. I'd click on the white balance, get it, and then go from this to my final image, which I've already edited over here. If I want to reset this, let's see where it goes to. Boom. So there's the original image. Here's where I took it to. And now it's going to come back. Okay. So that's how I know and I will invariably either color code it or add a star to it. And so I know, based on my system, what I want to edit, what I've edited, what I've shared. 3, 4, 5 stars. That's my system, for those of you that care.
Okay. Let's see. We did the profiling again. People really love that blue saturation, by the way.
Oh my God, it is. It's magic. It's
we had a lot of questions about using Passport in Capture One, and I've done my best to there's a video that's available on the Calibrite YouTube channel on how to use the Passport in Capture One, but that's really not what we're doing today.
Right.
Might be a good
later, because I love Capture One. And by the way, for those of you, so one of my favorite post-processing tools, sort of as an adjunct to either Lightroom, is the whole suite of DxO. Used to be Nick, some Nick Silver effects. I'm a huge fan. So again, I will create a profile here in Lightroom, get to my optimized place, and then go there and play even more. So, and then round trip. But the trick is always starting from the most neutral place. Many of you know me not just for still lives, but for flowers. Flowers are some of the trickiest things to get pure color of, because you don't remember the subtleties. So I am in gardens hours and hours a week, and there is always, hopefully you can see me, depending on the size of the flower and the level of macro I'm doing, I've got the Color Checker Mini and the Color Checker Nano. Like, this is for extreme close-up work where I want.
I'm going to shut down your sharing here for a minute so people can really see you. Hold those up again, because that's really magical. That
Right.
Nano is really.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you're doing still life work with watches or crystals or jewelry, and you want to get up close on a diamond ring, and you need it to be perfectly balanced, because we know if it's too yellow, it's cheap. It reduces the value. If it's too blue, or too anything, we want flawless diamonds. And we want to be able to control the lighting to some degree, but you're never going to be able to control it as precisely as working with one of these tools to get to that optimized neutral place.
Great. So why don't you click off your screen sharing? I will turn on my camera. And we have some really good questions that I want to just talk with you about. So what color temperature do you set your monitor when you calibrate and profile your monitor?
D65.
And
Always
what,
D65. It is the industry standard. We do that, non-negotiable. Don't go any further.
right.
Start there.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Alan, what do you use to profile your monitor? And does it have a USB-C cable? And I'm going to tell you for sure it does not at this moment, but any USB-A to USB-C adapter will get you right into a USB-C. Do you use it on a USB-C adapter, Alan?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, works absolutely fine. I use the advanced setting because I am a bit of a color wonk, dweeb, perfectionist, and it takes about 4 minutes every 2 weeks. But again, I am printing myself. By the way, when I'm printing myself, Color Checker Studio for printing, this lets me not just profile my monitor, but profile the paper. So I'll go through the patches of color on my screen, but then I will print out a test strip and I will run that across it. So now I know that my monitor and my printer match. So for those of you who are embarking on the same fine art printing adventure that I've been on, holy cow, get yourself a Color Checker Studio, like pronto, because the last thing you want to think about how expensive ink is and paper is, and you don't want to be throwing that out, right? This silly device paid for itself within maybe 3 months versus the waste I had. Now, for those of you who are not printing, you just need this. I'm going to give away a passport right this second.
Let's do
If
it.
someone can tell me what each of these devices is called, not the brand name, but what this is versus what this.
All right. I'm
It's got
watching the
5
chat.
syllables. So first person to do that.
I'm watching the chat. Let's watch the chat. All right. So while we're doing that,
Right, next question.
we've had a couple of people talk about using the passport if you're photographing wildlife. If you're outside. Oh, Jay Brown, there he comes. There he comes. I believe he was the first. Let me just double check.
Are we in chat or Q&A?
In chat. So Jay Brown,
Yep, I see it.
colorimeter and spectrometer is close enough. Spectrophotometer or spectrometer, both are usable. But
Colorimeter,
yep,
spectrophotometer.
there we go. All right, very good, Jay Brown.
If you're printing, the Studio, the Spectro. If you're just editing and sending out, all you need is the colorimeter. But there's a couple of versions. There's a baseline. There's a display. So the Color Checker Display. Then there's a Color Checker Display Pro, which is what I use. And then there's a Color Checker Display Plus, which is for super bright monitors and, in some cases, people doing video, right, Brenda? Did
Yep.
I have that right?
Absolutely.
So if you want to know what I do, it's the Color Checker Display Pro.
All right. Alan, one more time on what color temperature you set your monitor on when you profile.
D65.
D65. Okay.
So for those of you who do not yet have a colorimeter, you can go into whatever your monitor preferences are on your computer. I can't speak to all of them. I'm an Apple guy, so on my iMac Pro, I've got, I can do D65. If I'm using the calibration software, which is what I use to profile my monitors, I will go in, I will set it to advanced, and it will ask me, what temperature do you want to start with? And I will put in D65.
Wildlife, just as I said earlier to someone in the chat or the questions panel, you're standing in the same light your wildlife is standing in. Hold the color checker out there, take a picture of it, right? When you come back to edit, right? You got it, right, Alan?
Yep, that's it.
All right. So here's the question for one more. We're going to give away one more color checker passport. If you're going to calibrate and profile one thing in your workflow first, what do you have to calibrate and profile first? First one that answers in the chat, except for you, Jay. You've already won. Hey, Jim says get the bear to hold the passport for you. There you go. Here we go. We've got a lot of answers, but the first one was Fred Rosenbaum. Monitor is the first thing you want to calibrate and profile. All right, parting thoughts, my friend.
This is all about making you smile. I say this with every class I give. If you're not smiling, you're doing it wrong. This is about reducing any aggravation, any stress, any frustration in your life so that you can escape to this world that we all share. I mean, we're all here. We're all making images. We're all taking what's in our hearts and putting them out for the world. And you need to do that from the happiest place possible. So gear makes a difference. The right gear makes your life easier. It saves you time. It saves you money. So I would say, like anything, if you value what you do and you want to make it as enjoyable as possible, find tools that make that process better. For me, this is a set of tools that I can't live without. No kidding. If you're not smiling, you're doing it wrong. If you have questions, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram, and you can chat me up and I will happily answer them. I love this journey. I picked up photography 12 years ago. I am new to it, relatively speaking, and it has become one of the great joys in my life, and I love to share the process. And the more I give secrets away and share what I know, the more it forces me to make new secrets. So I love interacting with folks. So please let me know what I can help with. And that's it. And Brenda, thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Great presentation. We had a great time. Thank you for coming. And we'll look forward to the next one, Alan.
Yep. Mwah.